I have here two portable record players that are currently being sold. The one on the left is a Crosley Cruiser. I've had that about a year. That comes in several different colors, as does this one here on the right, which I just got. This is the model is the Vintage Turntable, and it's sold by a company called 1byOne. That's number 1byOne. So as you can see, these two are very similar here. In construction, some parts of it almost seem identical, especially these corner pieces. They're both pretty much the same size. You can see that the 1byOne is just a slight bit taller, but other than that, same footprint. So I got this one about a year ago, and I'd seen the reviews. The sound quality wasn't great, but I didn't expect it to be. I mean, this is some cheap thing made in China. It didn't cost a lot of money. However, I did not expect the sound quality to be as quiet as it was. I figured it would sound real tinny, but very, very quiet. So I saw a couple of reviews for the 1byOne model. Actually, a couple of YouTube users had done reviews of them. And they said kind of the same thing about the Crosley. It's maybe something, no audiophile is going to be wanting to listen to a record on this. But it's something maybe, a kid might like, or maybe someone in your family that just wants to listen to some old records they have. So I just wanted something that I could take out in the patio and not have to worry about, if it got knocked over or something like that. And, so what, big deal. But this Crosley's almost not loud enough to do that, and they are pretty cheaply made. So let me start with the Crosley here, because I wanted to compare the two of these, because if I'd ever seen the two of these side by side, I probably wouldn't have bothered to buy that one. They both have their positives and negatives, though. So I'll start with the Crosley, because I've had that the longest. The construction of the Crosley is just as the 1byOne. They're both very, very solid, very well made, with a real solid, handle and a pretty substantial latch. The hinges seem to be pretty good. The thing I don't like about the Crosley, and I didn't even realize this until I both these I bought online and I got shipped to my house. I didn't realize that the darn power cord, which is a DC adapter, goes in the back of the unit, so that you can never stand the thing up, which is stupid. So let's look at the ports that this has on the back of it. It's got it's just got a left and right audio out, RCA audio out, which a lot of times I do just hook this up to the stereo in the house here. I do have a turntable, like a nice old Philips turntable on there, but it has a problem with when it gets to the end of the record. So sometimes I just hook this up, and what's nice about this is, I can hook this up with a long audio cable and sit it right next to the couch and just listen to 45s or whatever, and rather than getting up and going, thanks, cat. Rather than getting up and going over to the turntable over there. So it also has an auxiliary in jack, which is interesting. I've never actually tried that, because you wouldn't really want to listen to anything on these speakers. It's not very good. Anyway, let's open it up. Okay, so the one thing I don't quite like about this is where it stops. The hinge construction seems a little flimsy. And I'll show you more about that in a minute. So it's got a little rubber pad that goes over top of the turntable there, and it's got some very Chinese-looking controls here. You got your speed is the one right there. Both these record players do 45s, 33s, and 78s, which is kind of cool, because I actually have a bunch of 78s. And then an interesting thing here is the auto stop control. Basically what happens is we turn it on, and the auto stop control is enabled. The table won't start moving until you get the arm over it, and then when it gets to what it perceives to be the end, it stops. Although I found it does not work on all records. Some records, I guess, are a little, they end a little bit further out than this thing seems to think. So anyway, it also has this cueing lever, which is not very accurate, but extremely gentle. So that's good. So it's got your little 45 adapter here. And oops, and that's about it. And of course it's got this little latch so you can not have the tone arm fall all over the place when you carry it away. So before we listen to anything on this, let's take a look at this one. Okay, so now for the 1x1. As you can see, again, very solidly constructed. These pieces almost look exactly the same. You can see the speaker grills are plastic rather than metal. It's got a different style handle, but still a nice, pretty solid, substantial handle with some sort of leatherette type stuff on it. And it's got a different type of latch. It's a flip type latch, almost like a toolbox has. But still, it's a pretty nice latch. One thing I like about this is the hinge, when it opens, has a much more positive stopping point for the lid. So that's kind of, at least doesn't seem like it's going to break, as whereas the Crosley, it just feels like it's going to break or bend. Now this one, again, there's pluses and minuses to both of these. This one doesn't have the rubber platter that the Crosley has. However, if you see underneath, it's got the exact same 3 little rubber dots, so this is just sort of an extra. Anyway, so this turntable, as you can see, the actual mechanism looks almost exactly the same, and it is probably no doubt made by the same manufacturer. One of the things I really like about this is there's nothing on the back, so there's nothing to stop you from, once you're sure that you've got this locked in, there's nothing to stop you from latching this thing up, leaving it plugged in, even hooked up to an external audio source, and just standing it on its end, which is, you know, what I would prefer to do. So this thing has everything on the side here. You've got your on-off volume control here. You've got your DC power plug. You got a headphone jack. You got your RCA line left and right outs, and again you have your line in. Now the only thing that's maybe a little more annoying about this is that your volume control is over here where you kind of can't see it too well, rather than up on the platter there. It's got the same exact controls. No differences here. One big difference, which I do like a lot, is that this actually has some shock prevention. It has the whole thing is suspended on springs, unlike the Crosley, which has absolutely no shock protection, which I found several times when I'm playing this in the house. You know, old wood framed house here, walk into the room and bam, I made the record skip just by stepping too hard on the floor, or maybe I bumped into the table slightly. This one doesn't do that. So let's listen to the two of these. I can show you what I mean about the sound quality. So I've got a pretty clean record on here, pretty scratch free and currently pretty dust free. So should be a pretty good example of as good as it's going to get with this thing. I think this is a pretty good record to get an idea of what the deficiencies of these machines are. Piano seems to really come through with. Now you hear that sort of a little bit of a hissing, scratching sound. I don't hear that on my big turntable that's hooked up to the stereo, oddly enough. So it's possibly just the quality of the needle is not as good. I believe both these two machines do that. So ignore that for right now. Right now, this record player is turned up as high as it goes. And as you can tell, I'm sitting right in front of it, and I'm still able to talk at a pretty reasonable volume and talk right over the thing. So, not a very loud record player. And of course, when it's up all the way, you can hear on some of those high notes, it gets a little crackly. Look how close the record is to that lid. I know this record's a little warped, but it's awful close. So I'm going to take you to a track now that I think really shows off some of the weaknesses of this thing. It's got a lot of high piano notes in it. And again, this is up all the way. Yeah, so you hear that? A little bit of vibration from the speakers. Obviously the sound is very high and very tinny. Yeah, there it goes. And you know, again, it's hard to tell by watching a video, but this is not loud at all. I'm in a small room and this is not even remotely loud. Very high-pitched sound, the speakers on this thing. And now, the 1byOne. Turn that up a little. Now, I would say right now that this record player is turned up to the maximum volume level of the Crosley. Maybe right about here. And it's hard to see the mark there, but that's only halfway. However, if you turn it any higher than the max volume on the Crosley, it sounds terrible. Hear all that vibrating plastic and whatnot? Yeah. Now turn it up a little more. I think we're at about 3/4 volume here. That sounds pretty awful. That's max volume. Yeah, see, so it almost doesn't even matter. Now see, this I have to kind of yell over, but it almost doesn't even matter that this thing gets louder, because you can't listen to it at anything louder than halfway, which is about as loud as the Crosley gets, because if you turn it up more than that, then all you're listening to is rattling plastic or just the vibrating speakers. It almost doesn't even sound as good. Let's see. Alright, let's listen to Carol of the Bells, that track 5 again. Oops. So the volume is at halfway, and again, I think this is about as loud as the most I can get out of the Crosley. And even then, it doesn't sound as rattle-free as the Crosley. Let's see where we turn it down where we don't hear that. Wow, you gotta put it pretty quiet to not hear these vibrations. Look how close the record is to the underside of that lid. I think this one's a little bit more distance than the Crosley does, though. What's your take on this? So let's hook it up to the big stereo and see how these two stack up when plugged into a real amplifier. So when the line out jacks are hooked up, you have to turn the volume down all the way because the sound will continue to come out of the built-in speakers, which is odd. You can hear a lot of background noise there. Definitely a more fuller range sound than what we were getting out of the built-in speakers. Another advantage of the controls being on the side is I can plug these cables in without having to remove the record and close the lid because that area is kind of blocked. And again, we have to just turn it on, but make sure that the volume knob is turned down all the way because otherwise you will get sound out of the built-in speakers. You can hear less background noise, still a little static. Still a little scratchy sounding. For whatever reason, this just sounds different hooked up to the stereo. Like, I don't know, I can't quite put my finger on it. Like, it sounds not as full as when the Crosley's hooked up to the stereo. So just for comparison, let's listen to it on my old Philips turntable here. See a lot less background noise already. Now, I hadn't used this turntable in a while, And earlier when I was listening to both these records, I listened to the whole side on both the Crosley, the 1byOne, and then on this turntable. And of course both the Crosley and the 1byOne being hooked to the amplifier here. And I thought maybe the Crosley sounded a little bit better hooked to the amplifier, you know, than the 1byOne did, but boy, when I put it on this turntable here and played it, I was like, wow, the range that at least I'm hearing in the room right now is so much wider than anything that was coming out of either of those two portables hooked to the stereo. You can hear the highs, you can hear the lows. You know, and this is just a turntable I found in the garbage somewhere. So here's my final take on these two. I'm gonna rate them in different ways because there's no clear winner here. Start with the Crosley. I would give the overall construction of the unit a 9. I'd give it a 10 if it weren't for the fact that these hinges make the lid feel like it's gonna keep bending or break. Other than that, the construction's pretty solid. I would rate the design of everything, you know, the placement of controls and stuff like that. Well, it gets a little bit of a bonus for having that rubber platter and having the volume knob up here. It doesn't have the shock prevention, so it loses some points there. It has the jacks on the back of the unit, which is ridiculous, so it loses a lot of points there. So I would say for the overall design, I'd give it a 5. For sound quality, well, it's got pretty low volume level, but it doesn't get to the volume level that the 1byOne does, where it sounds just almost unlistenable. It's so things are vibrating so much. So I would say I'd give the sound quality an overall 5 out of 10. Overall, I guess I would give this whole machine a 5 out of 10. So let's take a look at the 1byOne. The construction of this thing is just as solid as the Crosley, except the hinge on the lid seems to have a much more positive feel to it when it stops. However, I don't really like this latch. I mean, it's not too bad in quality, but it seems to be kind of easily popped open. Doesn't take much effort to pop that open, whereas this, you get your fingers in there, and it's a little less likely to be done accidentally. I would give the overall construction again a 9 out of 10. In terms of design, well, may not have that rubber platter, but it's got this nice shock absorption, spring-mounted thing for the whole turntable mechanism. It has the jacks on the side, which is a great place for them, although the volume knob It's hard to see the level that it's at. It'd be much nicer if it was up top. But overall, for the design, I would say I'd give it a 7 out of 10. For the sound quality, I would say that the speakers are definitely not up to the task of what the amplifier may be able to put out, which is why everything sounds so terrible when it's turned past half volume. So I would give the sound quality, even though it gets louder than the Crosley, it doesn't matter. I would give the sound quality a 4 out of 10. It's really not very good. Overall, I guess, I would give it a 5 out of 10. There's no clear winners here. But I guess it depends on what your needs are. For me, I think I'm going to stick with this Crosley because I use it mostly outside, and because the volume thing is a moot point at this point because you just can't even turn it up past halfway. So let's just say they both have the same sound output for all intents and purposes. I'm going to stick with the Crosley because when it's turned up all the way, it doesn't sound terrible. And I don't really need the shock absorption because I'm listening to it out in the patio. You have to do a lot of jumping on a concrete patio to make a record skip. However, if you were someone who just wanted to use it in your house for occasional listening use, I would say that this 1byOne is pretty good. Mainly because it's got this shock absorption, shock prevention on the platter. I would prefer to listen to both these hooked up to a stereo. You know, even when I use this outside, I think this summer I may just try to hook it to a small portable stereo, like my old Panasonic here. That thing sounds pretty good. So, if you're looking for something for a kid or somebody who, maybe an older person, just wants to be able to listen to some of those records they have that they haven't listened to in 30 years, they're both pretty adequate for that. Bottom line, if you have a place indoors where shock absorption of the turntable platter might be helpful to you, go with the 1byOne. But if you don't, go with whatever one costs the least amount of money. But if you like to listen to your records, and I mean really listen to your records, you're not going to want either one of these.